All right, we are on. All right, guys, welcome to the Elite Edgecast with my crazy awesome guest, Melissa Cady. I almost said Cady. Melissa Cady.
Good job.
I joke too much in the gym, that's why.
I know.
So, Melissa, you recently launched a book, which I wanna get into in a little bit because I feel like it's a really awesome topic to touch on. But most of the folks listening, they are kind of like in the fitness arena, really looking to kind of up their game on that side of things. So before even we get into your previous contest prep experience, tell us a little bit, like just kind of what makes Melissa Melissa. Like, tell us a little bit about yourself.
A lot of experiences. I'd say initially my whole life kind of started off with loving sports and got into personal training and did that a little bit while I was finishing up college. And then I finally, while doing personal training, decided when I had some people or clients that were having back pain or heart problems, I felt a little uncomfortable and I wanted to know more.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate enough that I was very diligent in my studies with school that I decided to pursue going to medical school. So I kind of chose between a DO and an MD school in Texas at that time. I had that option. And so I got accepted to the UT Houston and to Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine. And I was almost thinking about doing massage therapy.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So I've liked a lot of things. Thought about doing public health. I just loved fitness and wellness and all of that. So I chose to go to the DO school in Fort Worth, just because I thought that the assessment and the tools that they use to help treat like biomechanical issues would be really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of worked out for that time of my life in that location. So I chose to go become a DO, and a lot of people don't know what that is, but essentially in this country, they're equivalent. You go to medical school for 4 years. So I did that, and then I honestly loved everything because I love learning. And so I did a year of internal medicine, a year of general surgery, 3 years of an anesthesia residency, which I wasn't planning on doing anesthesia. I was trying to get in radiology. I loved everything, like I said.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did a year of a pain fellowship. So right now, currently, I'm a board-certified anesthesiologist, a board-certified pain medicine physician. I was formerly, obviously, a personal trainer. I also worked in physical therapy as an aide before I went to medical school and worked in doctor's offices. So I kind of took a non-traditional approach and had a gap between college and going to medical school.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I have a little bit of that experience. But my current practice right now is it's part-time anesthesia, but I love helping people. And when I did my pain medicine fellowship and got board certified, I saw the way that the practices were being run. And a lot of it was symptom management and not dealing with the problem. And it
Mm-hmm.
disturbed me a lot. So right now I'm just all about educating and with the book and all of that. But I would say I'm a fitness enthusiast.
Okay.
I call myself the challenge doctor for several reasons, because I like to challenge the industry itself to think about how we're doing things and how we can do it better. And I like to challenge people to realize that the little things we do make a big difference in the long run. And if we challenge our health, then we can actually improve our health for the better. And so I'm the challenge doctor. I'm a fitness enthusiast. I'm a pain challenger. I'm a physician. I consider myself an entrepreneur because I want to give good value out there, not necessarily for the purpose of making money. We all have to make money, but more because I want to give good information that's really helpful and useful and is doing the right thing.
For sure. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So first thing that popped up in my mind was, I guess the first question, when you went through your contest prep experience,
Right.
Was it during that time? Like, was it during medical school? Was it in the academic gap?
Well, actually, okay, this is kind of funny. My fellowship training, my pain medicine fellowship, that was like 2008. I'm going to kind of age myself here, but
It's okay, you're in good company.
yeah, I turned 42 in a couple months. So, but 2008 to 2009 was when I did my pain fellowship, and I wanted, like, on a bucket list to do just do some competition, figure competition, and I did try to do an approach that was through a email trainer. It was actually, I think he was in Florida. Come to find out, he had a lot of problems with managing some issues with anorexia and whatnot.
Himself or with his clients?
Himself.
Okay.
Yeah, so I didn't know this till later. But so anyway, I went through trying to do the process, but the way it was designed with the food was so drastically different than what I was doing, that it was such a high protein diet that I literally had to go to the bathroom like every 2 seconds, and even in the middle of the night, like it was incredibly, it was not manageable. My quality of life was horrible.
Yeah.
People don't realize how you can change your diet too drastically from where you've been, and your body is not ready for it.
Exactly.
So I actually said I can't do this, not in the job that I have and taking care of patients and all of this. So I kind of like didn't do it, and then I waited till I got done with my fellowship. And so later in 2009, 2010 timeframe, I actually did. It was after all of my training and in private practice that I was doing anesthesia, that I decided to do 8 weeks. It was just 8 weeks of just.
That's so aggressive.
It's so aggressive.
So aggressive.
And I did 6 meals, and I kid you not, my boyfriend, now fiance, was eating, we were, on vacation, and he was eating a milkshake and eating all the stuff I don't need to be having. And it didn't bother me because I was so driven that I was going to get on stage, and I didn't want to embarrass myself. That I stuck to this 6 meal ritual, and it literally was chicken, little splash of spinach, sweet potatoes, and lots of egg whites. It was pretty much chicken, egg whites, sweet potato, splashes of greens, like some things that are really good for you.
Yeah. Just enough.
Just enough to add color to your diet.
The vegetarians got it wrong.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
And now I'm predominantly more vegetarian. I mean, I do have meat occasionally, but I find my protein in a lot of other volume of foods too.
Mm-hmm. So they're more bioavailable as well, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah. So, and you're more the expert in that. But I honestly just followed this email trainer ritual, and I did every day these 6 meals. I never deviated. I never cheated. I was hardcore. But my body, when I look back on it, was really starving. And it was not a healthy way of doing it. And so I learned a lot. Not that I know everything. I just know that was not the way to do it. And there's a healthier way to do it, which I know that you're doing.
So on that note, and I definitely want to get to that, how you felt, how you looked physically.
Oh, yeah.
First, kind of want to set, where was your mentality? So going through, knowing where you were coming from an academic perspective, also knowing you're developing opinions about health versus the industry or versus the system, and then volunteering yourself to go through this process. Where was your mind? Was there an internal battle? What was going on there?
Well, in the middle of all of it, my brain was emotionally, I'm a very, I would consider myself a very emotionally stable person. In fact, my fiance says I'm more like Spock because I don't deviate too high or too low. I just kind of can be
the MTV generation. What's like?
Yeah, so I could just take care of business and not let the emotion get in the way. But I would have to say that there was emotional changes going on, and I, even in the middle of it, told my boyfriend that I don't need to do this, because I felt like I was impacting his life. Too, and that it was very selfish for me to go through all this. But he was very supportive. So it's really helpful, obviously, to have someone on board with you, as you know. Yeah. So if they're not, it makes it just emotional hell, really. I mean, it's not an easy thing to go through. And if you don't have someone there supporting you, it just complicates the whole thing. So that was something just you bringing it up and me thinking back on it was I remember sitting on his lap in my mother's kitchen when we were visiting, and just said, I don't have to do this. I had tears in my eyes, and I felt horrible. And and I just didn't have. I think that I looked like I was a little too gaunt.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't a really healthy, full kind of like leanness. It was more of a drastic, aggressive, body's freaking out. This is not good for you. And then what you don't know also is that right after I came off the show, I knew I couldn't go crazy, but I didn't care. Like I was ravenous for carbs and all the stuff, the bad carbs. And so when I did that and I had to go back to work the next week, I started putting on tons of, essentially, my whole body was filled with fluid and in places I'd never seen before. And it was actually, I had trouble breathing.
Your coach didn't have a plan for you coming out of the show. It was just show and done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's not good at all.
And I even got my labs checked because I was worried about my liver, and my liver enzymes were jacked. And
well, with that much protein and that little micronutrients, it's just a cocktail for growth and balance.
Right. Well, and then also from what I understood is that when you have depleted your glycogen stores in your muscles, and then you suddenly have this extra caloric intake that can be basically replaced and replenished and create more glycogen. And every time you put, I don't know if it's every cc or every gram, you have 3 cc's of water go in with it, as far as,
it's depending on the study, it's 2.7 or 2 or 3 to 1, whatever.
It's definitely, when you look at increased volume of glycogen and everything, and insurgence, you have this fluid coming in from everywhere. Man, I clinically, I felt the symptoms of just, this, it's gross. It's like you get this swelling, all the dependent areas of your body, you get this swelling you've never seen before. And then internally I felt the bloating, and I felt like I couldn't breathe well. And who knows if I had a little fluid on my lungs, I don't know. But I went and got my labs checked, and there's definitely some significant, obvious signs that there were things going on internally, and it was not healthy. So I've never chosen to get back on stage. Not that I would never. It's just that was not a good experience.
For sure.
So it's not a healthy way to go. And I think the biggest lesson, and I see this in a lot of things that I do in medicine, our bodies are incredible at adapting slowly. And our bodies are fascinating and amazing. And if you give it the right signals and you don't overstress it and do things too fast, too hard, that it will give you the results you want if you have the right strategy.
For sure.
So good plug-in for what you do. Yeah,
100%. And I won't be self-serving on that one. But I'm just going to say I agree with you 100%. And, you're not the only person that I've spoken with, whether it was client or interview, who has gone through that process where it's multifaceted, where you go in, and because of what you're exposed to in the mainstream fitness competition community, it's all about being tough and grinding. And especially for those of us who come from an athletic performance background, we sort of, it's that confidence competence cycle where I was a great performance athlete, but now I'm doing something that's purely aesthetic. Well, the system is different, but the mentality is very much the same in that, well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grind. But as you alluded to, your body is very, very good at one thing, and that's keeping you alive, right?
Right.
And it doesn't care what you look like.
Right.
It just wants to make sure that systems up and down regulate to make sure that, your heart keeps beating and your brain keeps functioning.
Right.
And so, I've spoken with people who have done multiple shows back to back, and each show they continue to look worse and worse and worse because of the aggressive overstressing that they put their bodies through. And sometimes it's not until years later. My friend Madeline, I had her on the podcast, and she was in amenorrhea for almost 13 months.
Yeah.
And that's not uncommon because of the aggressive dieting. So, it's and that's a whole nother, line of conversation. But so when you were going through that, and you were in that space, like, what was the thing that allowed you to continue pushing, even though you saw to a degree the degradative health response?
Yeah. I think you see what you want to see when your brain's already determined to have something.
Mm-hmm.
So you focus on what you're supposed to do. And I don't think I really recognized the problems till later, and the after effects of getting back into a little bit more reasonable diet pattern. But I think I'm kind of bullheaded once I make up my mind on something. So I have that focus and that drive. And in fact, I just had a conversation yesterday with my fiance about how I'm he's like, "You're the most driven person I've ever met." And it's good and bad in some ways. It's got its pluses and minuses. But I think when someone lays out a plan for you and you don't want to fail, and you know that you're going to put yourself out there, and you don't want to embarrass yourself, and you want to look good, and you're basically kind of in a vulnerable state, and you know that people are going to look at you, I think you're more driven to follow through. I mean, look at all the women that, speaking of my wedding coming up, a lot of women, somehow they get very driven when they're suddenly the focus of attention for the wedding.
Sure, absolutely. That's why bridal boot camps do so damn well.
I know, because they have that end in mind. Like they see it and they know that this is, and plus people feel like if it's a certain structured period of time, it's not the rest of their life. Sometimes they're a little bit more, they feel like they can handle that. And so I think that's part of it. But I think when you have someone lay out a plan for you, and you feel like you've got strategy, and you have faith in that strategy, then you're more likely to stick to it. And then, of course, there's accountability that comes from that. So when you have someone on the other side and they're checking in on you, those two things together, a good strategy, it's laid out, you don't have to think about it, and someone's holding you accountable. Those are gold, I think, for reaching goals. But
yeah, 100%. And I think that's ubiquitous across disciplines.
Yeah,
for sure.
All right.
So let's use that. We know that, like, going from like the mental state you're in, and the reason why I wanted to ask that question on a side note is, for those of you who are listening or watching, when you're in that place, when your body's virtually switching energy systems from glucose dependent to amino acid or fat dependent, you don't necessarily have a fog, especially if you're consuming caffeine like most of us have during a prep like that, vast amounts of caffeine, but your clarity becomes a little bit foggy, and you start to adhere strictly to the process just for the sake of adhering to it, as opposed to going, okay, well, what really is the best for me? And we even see that in, I was watching a documentary not too long ago, and it talked about, well, what does it take to develop a cult? And one of the things that they talked about was deprivation, and glorifying that deprivation to a state of, when you can sort of mentally subdue somebody, and they say, okay, well, he's positioned or she's positioned herself in this place. Now, well, everybody else is doing it, i.e. the industry. So it's really easy to give yourself permission to be part of that herd.
Right.
And I think the biggest thing that we're starting to see over the last 3 to 5 years as a movement, in my opinion, in this whole contest prep or healthy living industry is adherence versus lifestyle, compared to, well, get your body to look like this in 8 to 12 weeks, or the number of pounds you drop signifies your social value.
Right.
And you and I have talked about this, like the gravitational pull on your body has zero influence on anything, even I would argue to a large degree, even health markers, and unless we're talking about like obese or morbidly obese, because everybody's density is put together in a different way. Everybody, functions and has environmental factors that are varying. So anyways, I kind of got on a tangent.
Yeah.
But from where you were in that mental state versus how you looked and felt physically. Speak a little bit more on that side of things.
I think for most women, I'll speak for myself. I think you always like that feeling that your waist and your tummy feels tiny, like,
Yeah.
and all the skin looks nice and smooth, and you're not getting dimply in areas, or it stays together, and not like when you sit down, it doesn't like spread. Just these.
Guys go through some of that too.
But from girls, a lot of the hips and stuff. Think about that, but I think I was so driven and focused on the process that, and it does feel good not to have like lots of food in your stomach when you do smaller meals. That benefit is there, but I think I enjoyed it, and I probably was wearing a size 4 at that point. I competed at. I'm normally like a size 8, and I'm about 150, 152 pounds at 5'8" and a half. I say 5'9", but the weight I dropped to, because obviously I was also a little dehydrated at the time I went on stage, was like 139 pounds, and that really wasn't healthy for me. I think my healthiest that I've been, with the leanest, and not necessarily in competition, is like 146. But obviously it's all about composition.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I don't really go by weight. I never get caught up in weight. I mean, if I jumped 160 pounds, there's a problem, because that's not where I should be. But I don't ever sit there and worry about 1 to 2 pounds here or there, because I know water has a huge impact. If there's a big change in weight, it's either you just went to the bathroom or you just, dehydrated or had lots of water. Either one, water loss or retention, or, you had to clear the system. So I've never really gotten caught up in that. So the whole process I was going through, I just like being lean, and that's just my thing. It was just a little bit more aggressive for that event. But the way I felt, like mentally and emotionally, I did have a little bit of that fog. But I think what bothered me the most was just having to, I hate to say it, but go urinate all the time. It was like, that was probably the most annoying thing from all of it.
Yeah.
that's really hard.
Part of the game. Yeah. Well, even for most of us, especially if, we can go back to the measurements we mentioned earlier, that 3-to-1 ratio of carbs to water. If you don't have the carbs in your system, especially if you're pounding water like crazy and aldosterone is there, then you're gonna pee all the time, because your body's like, okay, well, we have so much water, and number one, we don't have anywhere to store it. We don't have the carbs to use that subcutaneous reservoir, and so it's just everything is coming out. So, so for most folks, even folks that I've worked with, and that I don't do very aggressive dieting. I do, if somebody needs 8 weeks to diet, we do it in 14 to 16. If they need 12 weeks, we do it in 20, because I like to keep those carbs in there. But to a degree, it's, everybody kind of goes through that one. So.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I forgot to mention, it just popped in my mind, is that my boyfriend told me, you have this weird, like, smelling breath, like this, like, sweet kind of strange combination, aroma. And of course, it was kind of a higher protein diet.
Yeah.
It was probably some ketosis. I don't know, but I know that it affected that for sure. He noticed it, especially in the latter half of those 8 weeks. So some of it's not pretty, like when you think about what you go through so aggressively, and it's I'm glad I did it, because I learned a lot from it, and I don't think there was any, for 8 weeks of my life, it's not like I was putting my body through hell for too long, too hard. So, but I definitely, I didn't feel 100% myself. I mean, my body, it was feeling kind of good as far as the way it felt, like the shape and size and all that. But other than that, I would say internally and mentally, things were different. Just because I don't think it was too fast, too hard for what my body was used to.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's really anybody. I mean, 8 weeks, Like, if we're looking at numbers, I know we're both numbers people. So if I'm going to say somebody is going to get ready for a show, or even a boat party, or really whatever the event is, a reunion, whatever, and they want to get stage ready in 8 weeks. Well, that means that person is already, for most guys, they're already at 8.25% body fat at max, and women are approaching 11 to 12, which is really pretty low on both guys and girls. Because the target should be no more than 1% existing body fat loss per week, and that's super aggressive. Most of my folks 0.4 to 0.6.
Right.
But even at that, like, you already kind of have to be there, so it's something that you can kind of enjoy the process through, but it's also sustainable, and you don't come out of the cave just, oh God, can I just eat and drink something? And you just like crushing pizza and donuts, and then you get edema and you feel nauseous. And
yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I forgot. I think I was at 12.9, around 13%, and I dropped to about 8% body fat.
Yeah. And 8% is, that's still pretty quick.
Yeah.
So, and you did, what class is it that you did?
Well, for figure.
Okay. So,
my height.
I was thinking more like bikini when I made that statement, because you're looking at, you can be competitive for bikini at 10%, at 9.5%, but figure you got to come in, a lot harder, a lot more dry.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah, that was definitely my category.
And which show was it that you did?
It was the, it's in Dallas. I did 2 of them. I did in Austin, and I'm trying to remember the names of them. It's been like 5 or 6 years. Starts with an E, the one up in Dallas.
Starts with an E. Which, was it an NPC show, or was it?
Yeah, I'm not really well versed with that, but
okay.
It was like the biggest one that happens up in Dallas.
6 years ago. The Europa.
Europa, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I did that. I didn't place in that, but I placed 3rd in Austin, and there's an older gentleman that is a trainer, well-known trainer, David.
Oh, Dave Gooden.
Yes, I think
okay.
I think that was his. Whatever.
So it was either the Texas State Naturals or the Texas Shredder Classic.
I'm thinking Shredder, but part of me doesn't think so. I think it was the other one.
Was it a fall or spring show?
Let's see. So I did this right before. It was like late. Yeah, I think it was early fall.
Okay, so it would have been the Texas State Naturals.
Okay, so that was it.
Yeah, sweet. That's the one. That was my second show.
Okay.
Yeah, the show when I actually won my class and won the novice, I did it at the Texas State Naturals.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was in the same month. Like, it was like back to back by a week or two. I did 2 shows like close to each other. Yeah, that was it.
So, so knowing kind of like your experience versus how you felt should happen, how much did that? And I'll use this as a segue. How much did that influence your most recent project, which is the pandemic launch?
Just going through that process and how it influenced me to write the book, or just my attitude and philosophy behind the book.
Yes. just lay it out. And how much? I guess how much of that particular experience or couple of experiences influenced the book, or if at all?
Sure. No, I think everything that I do ties into each other. It's funny, I do anesthesia, but my love and my passion is being in a very active environment and sitting in an operating room with no windows. It's not my idea of wellness with gases and so you can,
really weird.
but I take pride in what I do, and I believe in keeping people safe, but I think with what I went through and what I currently do right now is that I recognize the importance of first of all, how brilliant the human body is, and how much more brilliant it is than we can figure out at times, and that our bodies are meant to have homeostasis or balance. And that idea of balance, for whether it's nutritionally, fitness, and when it comes to pain, I look at fitness, so many people get so caught up in, pushing it so hard, so fast, but not preparing their body for that kind of intensity, and end up getting injured. And then also little insidious things that, as a personal trainer, like if someone's, always doing something turned to the right and they're not keeping in balance, they start getting some pains in one area because they're favoring one side all the time. It's like, it's not like you have this immediate injury and it's obvious that you injured it. There's so many little things that we do in our lifestyles or in our habits, including how we work out, how, all of those things combined from a biomechanical standpoint.
Like how you sit when you're at your desk, like
right.
There's no all of a sudden I got hurt. No, it's been a series of things. Yeah.
Right. So people are disinclined to understand because it's so invisible and it's so insidious that it just kind of happens overnight to them. And I really felt like, man, people just, when it comes to body awareness in this country, and even nutritionally too, but definitely body awareness, if you're not using your body, you're not neurologically challenging your body, it's really hard to have great body awareness. And so people that don't have good body awareness or are ignoring those signs around them is, when they don't pay attention to that, then they're so surprised and they have a hard time believing somebody saying, oh, well, let's evaluate your habits. And they're like, well, I didn't do anything wrong, But, I'll give you an example. I had someone who, this is way back in training, and had was having shoulder and neck pain and shooting arm pain, but still had function in the arm and all of that. And so I just started asking her about her habits, or not her habits, I didn't say it like that. I just said, well, what do you do every day? And then, I work at a pharmacist or whatever. I'm like, well, what do you do for them? And then she says, well, I take these calls and do that. I was like, well, what kind of phone do you use,
She's constantly like this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and how many hours a day do you do that? 8 hours? I'm like, you have to be your own investigator. Like, physicians or pain professionals or, personal trainers or yoga therapists. I mean, there's all these people out there that have this perspective and skills, different skill sets and expertise that can be kind of your co-investigator per se, and help lead you down the path of trying to figure out, well, what is it that might be leading to that problem? So I think when you look at doing that competition, when I've had experiences with patients, when I just have been on this earth for so many years, start seeing patterns, and you realize our bodies are brilliantly made in most cases, and they want, like you said, to survive, but they want some semblance of balance. And when you throw that off nutritionally, there's a price to pay.
Yeah, big time.
If you throw that off biomechanically, there's a price to pay. I mean, and just because you're, having back pain doesn't mean it's the back that's causing the problem. It might be the cast that's 2 inches higher than the left leg that's making you hike your hip, and you've been doing that for a couple months. And your body's trying to tell you, hey, something's wrong. Something's not right here, and we're not in balance. So I have a deep appreciation for the homeostasis. I say that a lot, but balance in general, because a trainer working in physical therapy, realizing the lack of training in medical school on this issue. I'm a DO, so I do get some aspect of that, and I think a very good training if you use it. But a lot of physicians, and it's no fault of their own, but the way that they're trained is that they don't get a deep appreciation for it. And then me dealing with being a patient and doing a workout where I was doing hack squats and doing single leg pushes with really heavy weight and torquing my low back and my hips, putting pressure through one side and feeling a twinge, but didn't really hurt. But then for 6 months, I couldn't tie my shoes. Like, it's all this sense of your body wants balance. It will naturally gravitate back to, balance if it can. But sometimes you need professional help to help figure out what is it that's off with you, and it may take time to figure out. So that's where a lot of frustration, I think, in the pain world is it takes time sometimes to figure these things out.
And here's something, again, for those of you who are listening or watching, a challenge that I would give you is really easy. If you're standing for extended periods of time or you're sitting for extended periods of time, simply look at what happens. Are you neutral, except maybe your left foot's crossed over often? Get used to switching it. If you're sitting, you're watching TV. I find this a lot in my clients who are 45 plus, or anybody that's really retired and lives a moderately sedentary lifestyle. Is, well, I sit and watch TV, and then I get up and I move around a lot. I'm like, okay, well, you do the investigation. You find out that they're sitting watching TV 6.5, 7 hours a day. Right. And you say, okay, well, how do you sit? Well, I usually sit with my right leg crossed, and I got my drink over here. Okay, well, switch everything up. Do the asymmetry and see what happens. Yep. And all of a sudden, the stuff that they're paying, $600-700 a month for physical therapy and pain medication, it goes away because of that need and that inherent coding for balance.
Right.
So if you guys are doing that, if I'll use myself as an example. Now, as a personal trainer, I shouldn't use my air quotes here, but I'm using it as a joke. I spend 6, 7, 8 hours a day in front of my computer because most of my business is online, and I'm building things like the podcast. When I was 20, I was managing a pizza place. Spent a lot of time, sometimes 10 hours a day, standing up. But I was also leaned forward about 15 degrees because I was making pizzas. And so if you can kind of, for yourself, guys, in your lifestyle, what are you doing most consistently that doesn't really hit the radar because you're doing it super consistently?
Right.
That would be a great place to start.
Oh, absolutely. I even mentioned that in my book, just reversing your patterns.
I'll have to, I still haven't gotten a copy of that, by the way. I need to get one.
Well,
so my apologies for doing the interview without reading your book.
That's all right.
So leading into that, let's just use that. Tell us what the book is about specifically, or I guess not too much detail, but for those of us like myself who haven't read it, what can we expect from it?
Well, I would say that anyone that has pain currently, or maybe they have, or maybe they have someone they care about that has pain. Maybe they've had pain for a while and they just haven't gotten any results, and they've seen a million people, or maybe just a few people. This is really about giving a practical and holistic look at chronic pain. And when I say practical, it just, common sense. And when I say holistic, it's not this fringe medicine idea. It's all about, we all are very complex human beings, and then we have to look at the big picture. So I don't care what kind of professional you are. I think you're going to get the best results for patients if you're holistic in your approach. So it's really kind of give a brief understanding of what pain is, what it serves us for, our understanding or lack of understanding of it, and also the medical system, because that's a big component in frustration and obstacle, and sometimes a distraction that may not take you down the right path. And it has its time and its place. And then also what I call the anti-pain lifestyle, which is some of the things you're talking about. But it's really about self-care and how you incorporate that into the medical system and use those things together, because you have to bring your effort to the table and the most appropriate, least risk possible, if at all possible, to the table from the medical system. So that, in my words, I tend to say, I want patients to be using the medical system as a bridge, not as a crutch or as a train to get on. So it's better for patients to be empowered to do things for themselves and understand themselves and the best that they can, and recognize how they can use the medical system appropriately. Because we all know that we can't sit there and be dependent on it our whole life.
Yeah, you can't have a passive-minded approach for sure. So what have you found in the patients who are proactive, who have a good kinesthetic awareness, and are open to interpretation,
right?
Really, whatever the case is, like what have you found with them versus those who treat themselves like a petri dish and say, okay, well, here's what's happening, fix it?
I would say that they get fewer interventions from the medical system. Obviously, fewer side effects if you're using, interventions that all carry some level of risk. They tend to be, I think, and this is, of course, I don't have a pain clinic or a pain practice. I obviously help friends and family and colleagues and have been taking care of pain patients that I do anesthesia for, and I see this process going on around me all the time. And obviously I did a pain fellowship and actually took care of patients directly. So I've recognized that the people that have a little bit more awareness and you have to also have the education. If you're not, regardless if you have kinesthetic awareness or not, if you don't have the right education to understand that your spine doesn't just fall apart. Like it's not this like vulnerable, fragile thing that just collapses and you've gotten old and then you have to like protect yourself and not do anything. It's quite the contrary. You need to find that balance of where maybe a little bit of discomfort, which is equivalent to effort. You can't do nothing. But in a level of pain, if people have extreme pain, you can't push it too hard, too fast because your nervous system's already revved up. And so you don't want to over-escalate the nervous system, but you've got to find that place for you where you can still put in the effort, and it may be a little bit uncomfortable, and sometimes you can find places of no pain to do things, but you've got to find that place where you can put in an effort. So I think regardless if they're kinesthetically aware or used to using their body, if they're perceiving that the pain that they have is going to be detrimental, like they're avoiding pain, that whole pain avoidance is probably one of the most tragic things you can do to yourself. At least getting through that initial acute phase, you've got to start moving, because as you know, you start getting deconditioned and you start having these problems with, whether it's strength or balance or whatnot. But if you pull yourself out of doing things, it doesn't matter how aware you are. If you're fearing movement, that's going to put you in a really bad place. It usually creates more pain. I mean, as you know, if you're just, I talk about astronauts that come back from outer space and, they haven't had gravity, but suddenly gravity is a challenge for them and it hurts to walk. So I mean, if you're going to say you got to avoid pain, then you just might as well hang up their life and just let them lay in the bed. I mean, so there is a level of you got to break through some discomforts at times, but I think most people that are if they're the kind of people that are determined to get better and they don't have a lot of psychosocial issues going on in the background of a lot of anxiety and depression or stressors or lack of support, they're going to be much more inclined to get better if they don't have all those distractions, because depression and anxiety just make pain worse.
So tell me your thoughts on this, because this is one of the I mentioned to you a while back that I was developing this academy, and it's more like nutrition / mental conditioning. Right. But on the mental side of it, I speak a lot on finding the pain, like being sensitive to that, and then going into it.
Right.
Because typically we find that going into the pain provides some level of inherent education, but on the other side of that pain is a lot of power. What do you find, or do you speak to that in your book from the physical standpoint? Can
you repeat that? We kind of stalled out there.
Yeah. So what did you hear last?
You were talking about going into the pain?
Yeah. So from a mental conditioning standpoint, it's important to, whatever the pain is, whether it is a little bit of anxiety, whether it is negative self-talk or limiting beliefs, going into that pain, going through it and coming out the other side to find where that true power is. How does that translate, or do you mention that sort of thing in Paindemic?
I talk about how the kind of pain that and it's always, I think this is always a challenge in a personal training world or physical therapy world, because, I know someone personally that I'm surprised that they just, any kind of discomfort, it's like, I'm not meant for this, like I can't handle any pain. They're just used to living a life of kind of a princess life. But I think what probably the best thing to do is educate them on the result, or what's the ultimate goal? What's the purpose of your, there is a little bit of effort that's required. We agree that you can't make any strides in life, mentally or physically, if you don't get a little uncomfortable.
For sure.
And it doesn't have to be a lot of discomfort. If you are not the person that can tolerate a ton of discomfort up front, like getting in front of us on a stage and doing a speech when you've just been in your own little cubicle your whole life, doing a job, you might have to just start out with talking in front of 5 people, but that's still progress, so I think that you have to kind of figure out, I think this goes for anything. When we talk about homeostasis, you got to know where you're starting. What is it you've been used to? And where is it we're trying to go, and why are we trying to go there? Like, do you want to be able to play with your kids, or do you want to be stuck on the chair? There's got to be an emotional drive and motivation to do that. And so I think you've got to listen to the patient, to figure out the client, to figure out what is it that's important to them, and what is it they're trying to achieve. Once you figure out what's important to them, then you can figure out, okay, where are they starting, and then talk about that and say, okay, these are the options and the way that we can gently get you there. Or if you can tolerate a little bit more stress or a little bit more discomfort, then we can go maybe a little faster. But we also have to take in mind that your body can only make certain changes at a time. Otherwise, in fact, it's kind of like, think of if you do a bicep curl and you just add an extra 5 pounds of weight, and you get a little sore, but you don't really walk out of the gym with the bigger muscles. It doesn't happen like immediately. You might have engorgement of blood to the bicep, but your body has to respond to that stressor before it can make a positive change. So we're too impatient as a human population, I think. We want that immediate results. But the problem is people aren't respecting the fact that our bodies make changes incrementally. And so then they're like, well, I need to just throw on 20 extra pounds. You might be able to do it, but you're going to pay a bigger price.
Yeah. It's that law of compounding effects, right? That it combined with the fact that your body really is an amazing machine, and it will always adapt as quick as it can realistically to the stress that's provided. Right. So
and everyone's different. Everyone's different. Some people respond faster with more gains quicker, and you shouldn't look at it as you're less of a person than the other. The responsibility, I think, as a human is to figure out, understand your body and what it can and can't take. But we also can trick ourselves because we don't want the pain associated with doing things.
The ego is a very powerful, very manipulative tool.
Yes. So you can make yourself believe that this is too much. It's too much pain. It's going to cause a problem. When in reality, you just don't want to go through the effort. So trying to figure out when you're lying to yourself and when you're not, that's a tough one too. I think the smartest thing to do is just make small changes a little bit each time. And some people want that trainer yelling at them and getting mad at them or make them push hard. But I think if we kind of respect that we all need a little challenge, but we don't want to overdo it so that we're scared to come back, or we have so much pain that we don't want to deal with that again.
Yeah.
You don't want to associate too much pain when you're not ready for it,
Exactly. Yeah. It takes time. It's to kind of go through a bit of a process, I think, before you can really say, okay, well, I know what the law of compounding effects is. I know my tissue dominance. I know what body type I have. What's a realistic result that I can expect based on going through this particular protocol? Now, how can I maximize that? How can I optimize that not just for the result, but also my experience.
Right.
And that certainly does take time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because we're both kind of, the way we talk is a little bit cerebral, you know. I think the average person, which doesn't make us better or worse, it's just I think the average person is just kind of like, okay, I want this result. I don't like the way that felt. What can we do that's different? Or
yeah.
So it's based on, a lot of times based on how people feel, and they want the results. They don't want to hurt themselves, and talking in that kind of terminology is probably what they can relate to, a lot. But
so let's take a look at it as far as my female clients. Everybody wants bigger hamstrings and butt, right? And that certain body types, and we might have 10 different girls, but only 2 out of those 10 are going to really easily build a bigger butt and a bigger set of hamstrings, right?
Yeah.
Well, the way they build that, meaning how heavy the weight is, the volume of repetitions per training block, is probably going to differ compared to someone who is of a different body type, where it's more difficult to put the muscle on. But then you have to look at, okay, well, what's the benefit of my game?
Right.
Those 2 girls might be able to develop a donk, but they typically might struggle getting conditioned enough, whereas the other girls, those other 8 have to kind of feather the clutch a little bit when they go into a diet, because it's easier for them to get conditioned, so they want to work to keep. So it really is, I think you brought up a great point, which is kind of knowing yourself a little bit more, because the strengths in your game start from checking in, going, okay, well, who am I? What is it like to be me right now? And how can I enjoy this process and really maximize going forward? So,
right. Absolutely. If you don't harness, it's a gift when you're given, first of all, you're given life. I know it sounds, just funny I'm talking about in that general of a way, but we're given this body, and somehow we want to be like, I don't know, Kardashian or whatever. I don't watch those guys, but you hear about them all the time, and these people get like, oh, they're all just like these idols. So it's to me, there's a very huge mental part to all of this. And I know I've gone through it, and you judge yourself by how you compare yourself to other people, and that's a setup for failure when it comes to just being content with what you have, in the sense that, okay, this is what I am, this is how I'm built, and I may like this or like this better, or may not like this as much, but I'm going to try to find the best strategy for what I've been given to be the best that I can be, and be the best version of myself. Because it's just, people talk about my arms, but I don't put fat on my arms. It goes in the rear end. So, everyone's made differently. And so it's like you focus on your positive, and you try to strategize a way to enhance or improve the areas that you're not as happy with, but more in the sense of I am who I am, and I'm going to make myself the best that I can be, because that's all I can do, And
for a lot of you guys, again, listening, it sounds so cliche, and folks like you and I, we have to say that, but we always try to find a way around saying, to thy own self be true, because it sounds, it's almost said so much that it's lost meaning, right? Well, if you look at it from, our communication style standpoint, you mentioned it before, you got to know where you're starting from. Where you choose to go is up to you, and that's fine. But until you know where you're starting from, you're throwing darts in the dark. Right.
Oh, and this is a great example of those guys are like, oh, I used to run like I don't know, like I don't know what the times are, but these 100-yard sprints, and I was, I ran the mile in 4 minutes and 45 seconds, and and I'm like, well, what have you been doing for the last 20 years? It looks like you're carrying an extra 50 pounds, or you haven't done anything, or you've been smoking, and you're doing all these lifestyle things that aren't great for yourself, and you think you can just go out there and do it like you're just this machine that doesn't change.
Yeah.
And you wonder why you got hurt. Like, your body's not prepared for that anymore. You can't just because you can maybe go run through the motions. You just did a full out sprint and you haven't been jogging for the last 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, like
what do you expect's going to happen?
Your arms are going to work separate from your legs. You're going to feel like you're pulling a trailer. And here's something positive to pick out of that is that the environment that you put your body in, both internal and external, is always, in my experience, much, much more influential, especially when it comes to body composition and nutrition, than your initial genetic state.
Right.
And that's what makes sports like bikini competitions and bodybuilding and track events and all that stuff. That's what makes them so amazing, because you can be slow to start and develop a fast body. You can be like myself, graduated high school at almost 5'11", 135 pounds, and now, it took years, but later down the road, walking around at a relatively lean body fat percent, your body composition at 205 pounds.
Right.
It's doable. And I don't want to be a dead horse, because everything else I want to say from here on out is something that we've mentioned already. But understanding that if you simply put yourself in that environment and cultivate that, you'll get what you want. It just takes time.
Yeah, you mentioned precisely a lot of what I mentioned in pandemic is everything's a process.
Mm-hmm.
It is a process, and you can turn, the direction of where you want that process to go. And I even mentioned epigenetics in my book about we all have a sequence of genes.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if you look at my entire family, extended family, everyone, we don't look the same because our lifestyles are different. Mm-hmm. But we have a genetic sequence in a certain code, and that code determines what proteins are made, how, I'm going to make an ear here or make,
exactly,
here. Like, it doesn't just like everything show up everywhere. I mean, it's not this dysregulated thing. It's a very amazing, coordination of events. And throughout our life, our activities, our nutrition, our behaviors, our stresses in our environment are dictating which genes turn on and off. Mm-hmm. And so you are dictating what your body is going to be like. And I think it's extraordinarily empowering. It's a very new kind of field, but it's really just demonstrating how we can kind of help regulate some of the way that our body's health is going to be, especially diabetes and those things as well. So
I think it's fair to say if we've got somebody listening and the guy says, everybody in my family's skinny, I can't put on muscle. The girl's like, well, everybody in my family is big boned or fat, so I'm never supposed to be skinny. Wrong. Science says from a genetic expression perspective that you can do all these things.
Right. You're going to do it in your unique way.
Exactly.
But the question is, have those people that you're saying that they're just destined by the way they are,
mm-hmm.
did they really put in the effort and the strategy to turn on and off things to make things develop a different way?
Typically no, because of those self-fulfilling limiting beliefs.
Right.
So knowing who you are, like if you simply decide something, and I don't want to go over time too much, but I talk about this for a while now, and I believe that we live in a world where anything that we give meaning to will become real.
Right.
Especially if you give it meaning consistently enough. A lot of times we talk about these movies that play over and over and over again in our heads. Sometimes they're great things. Sometimes it's a bullshit story you tell yourself to avoid pain.
Right.
So if you want to change your body, if you want to get out of pain, if you want to live in a mansion and drive a Ferrari, you can do that. You just have to play the right movies in your head.
Well, that's true. And that goes for, even doing for myself and trying to put myself out there in a different way than my traditional, the way that an anesthesiologist or physician is supposed to, go down this path. Or even for you, like when you try to do something that is different and kind of throws people off and they don't quite understand, what you're doing, it's real easy for them to say, almost like kind of be, a dream killer, and that, and how your brain is affected by that is pretty impressive too. If you let those thoughts get in your head. So yeah, whatever voice you're giving yourself, whatever you're allowing to run in your head, is your actions are going to be determined by those thoughts. So
I think that's a really great time for me to ask a question. Ask everybody on the podcast this same question, and that is, if you could give everybody listening or watching, give them one piece of advice that, in your experience, allowed you to keep your edge.
Yeah.
What would that be?
That's a really good question. I would say that, are you talking about edge outside of just fitness? Like just everything in life?
Yeah, everything. We'll say an edge in keeping the balance.
Well, the first thing I think of is that I love to imagine and dream about, and that keeps excitement in my mind of the possibilities. I think that believing in yourself is obviously, you hear that all the time, but I like hold on to the moment. I try to discard people but the thoughts or the words that people use that may not be uplifting. I try to surround myself by people that are very encouraging and believe in me. So I try to write it down if I really have something I really want to go for, and I immerse myself around people of like minds, and whether that's a conference, which is the reason I ended up writing this.
Yeah, let's get a look at it. Let's get a look.
There you go.
That's the book, guys.
Yeah. But I never would have written this book if it wasn't for me kind of believing in a dream, whether I knew it was going to come true or not. And I really never thought a few years ago I'd ever write a book, but I put myself in an environment. You find experts. You find experts that know more than you do in something you've thought of maybe doing. And you end up getting a nugget or two from them. And what's even most important is that you believe that you can do it because you know they did it. And so, I believe in dreams. If I don't ever think of something new and different than what I'm doing every day that gets monotonous, that would be a really boring life. So that would be my first answer. I'm sure I could give you 10 answers, but that's huge, because otherwise you never imagine something beyond what you're doing. Yeah,
and I think that's crucial. I think that's awesome answer.
Yeah, well, thanks.
Well, Melissa, it was awesome. We definitely went a little bit over an hour, so hopefully I didn't put you back in your schedule. I really, really enjoyed it. If people want to learn more about you, your practice, or especially the book, where can they find you?
You can go to challengedoctor.com or melissacady.com. I've got a few websites, but if they're dealing with pain, it's still in construction right now, but Pain Out Loud is kind of the community website I'm trying to develop for people that have inspiring stories of overcoming pain, or want to really just let their story help other people. And there'll be more things that come through that website, but challengedoctor.com is an easy place to find me. So perfect.
All right. Again, Melissa, thanks so much for being on. We really appreciate it.
Sure. It was a pleasure.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.